Hey everyone, Shane here with etrailer.com. Today I have a 2017 Cameo Fifth Wheel. I'm going to walk you how to install the Hydrastar electric over hydraulic actuator kit for disc brakes. This is a 15-foot kit, so if your camper is a little bit longer, I would recommend going up to the 25-foot kit. You can find that here at etrailer. A lot of people are switching over to electric over hydraulic systems on their heavier campers. The reason being is on a normal electric drum brake setup, you'll find that sometimes one brake will wear out faster than the other. You're not going to get as much braking pressure. Typically, you have to manually adjust those. With electric over hydraulic, we don't have any adjustment we have to do but add fluid into our actuator and make sure there's fluid in there. And our brakes are going to get the same amount of pressure to each one. So we're not going to have any we're not going to have one brake that's not getting as much as the other. The system is going to be 1600 psi, so we're pushing 1600 psi of fluid back to each one of our brakes. So that's going to give us much better braking power in a shorter distance. This kit's going to be designed for your single and tandem axle trailers with disc brakes up to 14,000 pounds. The kit is going to come with all the fittings necessary. They're all going to be brass fittings. This kit is also going to come with the breakaway switch and battery. The battery is rechargeable. This is what our case looks like. We have a push to test, so that'll tell us what charge our battery is at. The battery is replaceable. You simply remove the screws, fold open the lid, and you can remove the battery and install a new one if need be. Now, not all kits are going to come with a breakaway switch and battery. However, I highly recommend going with one because by law, if you have a breakaway switch on your camper, it has to run off a separate battery. Now, how the actuator works is we have a couple wires coming off. We have a 12-volt power source, which is coming from our vehicle when we're hooked up through our 7-pole plug. We have our brake controller, or a brake controller in our truck, hooked up to it, and we also have it running to our breakaway switch. When we apply the brakes in the truck, the actuator turns on and it pushes fluid out to each one of the discs or each one of our wheels to provide us that braking power that we need to stop a trailer this size. This is what our actuator is going to look like. You can see it's an aluminum casing. It's not very large in size. It's also going to have a bleeder valve, and that allows you to bleed from the actuator side rather than the brake side if necessary. As far as the installation process, it's really not that difficult. The hardest part, in my opinion, I'd have to say, is probably the wiring. Even though there's not that many wires we have to hook up, it's tracking down the wires that we have to use and make sure we have the correct wires connected to the correct wires from the vehicle. Now that we've gone over some of the features, let's walk you through how we got it installed. To start your installation, you need to determine where you're going to mount your actuator. What I found to be the best, this opening here is actually for a generator. I don't know for sure if they're going to be putting a generator in later on, so I didn't want to mount it in there even though it would be easier. So what I found is right in between my two battery boxes, straight down. With it being in this location, we're still going to be able to see if we need to add fluid or be able to monitor our fluid level. Wherever you decide to mount your actuator, you just want to make sure it's easily accessible so that you can get your wiring ran and your hard line that runs into the back that runs to your brakes. Once you determine where you're going to mount your actuator, you need to determine where you're going to mount your breakaway switch battery. You want to make sure that this is close enough or in the proximity of your actuator, because we're going to have a few wires that are going to have to be tied together. On your actuator, you're going to have 4 wires. You're going to have a black, yellow, blue, and white. White is going to be your ground. Blue goes to the in-cab controller in the vehicle. Yellow goes to the cold side of the breakaway switch. Black is going to be 12-volt power. On your breakaway switch battery, you're going to have 3 wires. White is going to be ground. Red is going to be for 12-volt power to charge the battery. Blue is going to go to the hot side of the breakaway switch. One thing that is not included in the kit that is highly recommended is a circuit breaker. This is for your power wire that's running to the 12-volt power coming from the vehicle. The circuit breaker is going to protect the factory wiring on the vehicle from any backfeed. Next, we need to determine what wires we're going to be using. We're going to be using the 2 wires from our breakaway switch. We're going to need to find the 12-volt power source that we're getting from our vehicle. I determined the two wires that come from my original braking system are this, running this jacketed wire right here. I don't know if you can see it, this right here, and it comes with this blue and white wire inside of it. I followed it and tracked it inside, and it comes out right in the corner where my actuator is. Here where my wires came down. These are my two wires that I found up top that were in the jacket. I cut my blue and my white wire, because again, I'm not going to need the bottom side running out to my brakes anymore. I took my blue wire coming from my actuator and tied it in with the blue wire in the jacket. My yellow wire, I tied in with the white wire. For my power, which is the black wire coming off the actuator and the red wire coming off of my Breakaway battery, from the red wire I went to the silver post on the breaker, black wire coming from my actuator, silver post on the breaker, and then I extended a wire, took a wire from the copper post, ran it over and connected it to that 12-volt power source that's running up to the junction box. The only wire that we have to run up at this point is going to be the blue wire coming from a Breakaway battery, because it has to be connected directly to the hot side of the Breakaway switch. All I did was took a wire, use a coat hanger or whatever it is, and straight up top there's a cavity that runs up to your Kingpin. I just took it and fed it up, attached my wire, or extended my wire, attached the wire to it, and pulled it out. This whole cavity is all open. I ran my wire straight through here. There is some insulation in there. Ran it straight back, and it runs right back into that opening where everything is. And this is that wire coming off of my Breakaway switch battery. I connected to the orange wire on my Breakaway switch, my blue wire that runs over into the junction box. I actually disconnected it off this hot side and connected it directly to the white wire that I connected my yellow wire from my actuator to. My blue wire that was in the jacket that I connected to the blue wire that has to run to the in-cab controller, I connected to the blue wire coming off the jacket, and then to the wire coming off of my brake controller post on my junction box. After you get all that connected, we need to run all of our hard lines and connect them to our brakes. We need to kind of take a look at our camper, determine a route that we're going to take before we start running our lines, because the lines, they are thin, and if you bend them too much, they could get weak in one spot and split open. So what I did is, off the back of my actuator, there's a hole where all these lines run through the wall or through the frame right to an underbody panel. I ran it right through the same hole. This underbody panel right here, right along this edge and the front edge, I just took out some of the self-tapping screws, pulled down this panel, and that wires and everything come out right on this edge right here. So you can see where my line comes out. I did wrap a little bit of, I put some vacuum line on it, just in case it does hit the frame rail for any reason, it doesn't damage it. Followed this hard line here, and I ran it straight back to the first axle. So what I did find, it was with my main line. This kit was actually too short for this camper. So what I had to do was, right here, I added a female fitting and a 3.5 foot rubber line. You're going to get a 4-way fitting that comes in your kit. This is for where your main line runs back. Now I did have to add a bracket because the rubber line was awful close to the spring pack, and I was a little unsure if there was too much flex in there, if it would damage the line. So what I did is I just added a bracket and then mounted my fitting onto it. So you can kind of see how I have it set up. My main line coming in to one end, my line coming off my brake into one. I have a line that's going to run across to the other side of the vehicle, and then I have a line here that runs straight back to my rear axle on the same side. And you can see how my rubber line, my flex line, runs right into the back of my brake caliper. My second line that runs from my front axle to my back axle on the same side If you follow the line, we'll have another fitting, and that's going to connect our hose coming off our second brake to our second line. Now for our third line, that goes across the vehicle to our other brakes. Kind of see how I have it ran. I ran straight across, and you'll have another fitting that has 3 connection points in it. It doesn't really matter how you hook them up, as long as you have the 3 lines running into it. We have our main line that runs across the camper running in the center. For our front brake, flexible line, we have it running into the front side. And then again we have another hard line that runs from that front axle to the back axle, which is connected the same way as we did on the other side. Now we're going to use a 3/8 wrench to tighten all of our fittings. It is a good idea to use a line wrench if possible. Now that we have everything connected, we're going to go ahead and add the fluid into our actuator and start getting our brakes bled. Now we're going to use either .3 or .4 brake fluid. We need to fill up our actuator to almost to the top of, once you remove the cap, almost to the top of it. We're going to get a second set of hands, and we're going to start bleeding the brakes. What we want to make sure of is the second person that's up here is going to be pulling our breakaway switch to activate the brakes. We want to make sure that they're watching the fluid level inside the actuator, that they're adding fluid as it's going out, because we want to make sure that we don't run the actuator dry as we're bleeding the brakes. Now you can see I have a hose with a small bottle. We're going to have 2 fittings on our caliper. We're going to use the top one because the air in the lines, it goes up. So we'll have somebody up front pull the breakaway switch while they're watching the fluid. What we're looking for is clear fluid with no bubbles coming out of this line. Once we get that, we're going to close this, have them shut off the breakaway switch, and then we'll move to the next one. We're starting with the one that's farthest away from the actuator. Close it. We'll repeat that same process for our remaining ones. Now that we have fluid ran through all of our lines, we've bled them, we need to go back and check to see if we have any leaks on any of our fittings. Now that we've checked all of our lines, gone ahead and topped off the fluid for our actuator, we're ready to go. It's going to do it for a look at in installation on the Hydrastar electric over hydraulic actuator kit for disc brakes on a 2017 Cameo Fifth Wheel.